The morning newspaper from the Day Times of Galilee had this morning, it says the local fisherman walks on water. What? Let's hear the story.
Immediately, Jesus made the disciples get into the boat and go ahead of him to the other side while he sent the multitudes away. And after he had sent the multitudes away, he went up to the mountain by himself to pray. And it was evening, and he was there alone. But the boat was already a great distance from land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. And in the fourth watch of the night, he came to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were frightened. "It's a ghost!" they cried out in fear. And immediately Jesus said to them, "Take courage, it is I, don't be afraid." And Peter answered him and he said, "Lord, if it be you, command me to come to you on the waters." "Come," replied Jesus. Then Peter got out of the boat and he walked on the water and he came to Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became afraid and began to sink, and he cried out, "Lord, save me!" And immediately Jesus stretched out his hand, took hold of him and said, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" When they got to the boat, the wind stopped, and those who were in the boat worshipped him, saying, "Truly, you are the Son of God."
The story can be found in Matthew chapter 14, verses 22 through the end of that chapter. And if you wouldn't mind looking in your Bibles into that, that's basically where we're going to be. And we're going to be studying about 4 different R's that come out of that particular passage. 4 R's that can be easy jotted down for your memory's sake as we look at this story. The first R that basically comes out of this passage, and by the way, I'm working off my Spanish notes here, so if all of a sudden I flow into Spanish, you'll know why I'm in Spanish. Because the first word would be refugio in Spanish. It's refuge in English. And the R's basically work back and forth. And so we're going to have fun with this one, okay? Anyways, a refuge is the place where you go to hide. And we see that these guys, they've gotten into a boat in verse 27. And they are guys that knew a little bit about boats, and they were going to go across this lake, Galilee, or the Sea of Galilee, as some would refer to it. And so we see that people often find security in different things. And these guys have found their security in a thing they called a boat. And we go into the story and we see that there's 4 things that are happening with this boat. 1, it is far from land. There's waves. Then there's wind. And there's lots of water. And obviously this boat is the item of security in the midst of those 4 things. And pretty soon they're being challenged as to their own refuge in this thing. Now, there's some people that also often will figure out that the refuge is to themselves. And so they will develop a whole system around them in order to protect against the wind, the water, the elements, or whatever might be affecting their immediate security. And so they've developed a security around themselves. Or, as the case of these guys, they also could have been like, okay, there's this ghost that's coming. Christ is not real. And there's those that will say that Christ is not real, and I will just stay where I am in my boat. He's just a ghost. Like they were initially saying, it's a ghost. You know, I want to insert something into all this. A couple of these guys were fishermen. They knew about boats. They knew about water. They knew about wind. They knew the elements. And yet, here they were. They'd taken their life and made a secure thing sort of in an insecure environment. Well, in the midst of that, this person that initially said was a ghost comes to them on water. Jesus walking on water. And so we see a request, or a request that comes out of this. And basically, where Peter says, Lord, if it be you, he was doubting a little bit. He was covering his bases. Lord, if it be you, command me. Command me to come to you on the waters. What fisherman would ask that? And here he was. Command me to walk on water. Can you imagine anybody dreaming that up? And especially being a fisherman? And Jesus replies very simply. It's one of the most simple invitations that you will ever find. And that is, come. 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 Wow. The boat is just an illusion. It is just a bunch of mirrors. It is just a bunch of nothing when it comes right down to it. Because when you're facing water, when you're facing wind, and when you're in lots of water and there's a lot of things going around, the boat is just an illusion. I tell you, there's a lot of people working with their illusions. It would be easy for Effie and myself to have stayed on this side of life. Oregon, Washington, British Columbia. I first started pastoring in British Columbia. Married an Oregonian, and we've been Pacific Northwest sort of home whenever we come this way. And yet, for us, we come, and soon we don't want to be here. I'd rather be where the wind, the water, the issues are. In fact, one of the promises that God gave to us early in our life, in our ministry, was a verse that we actually have in our wedding bands. And the promise is, it doesn't matter whether there's wind and there's river and there's fire, whatever, God will be with us. And that's been the confidence with which we have moved forward. Yeah, when I first started into missions, I was earning 3 times more in what would have been my secular job at the time than I ever made in those early days in missions. Oh, I could have stayed fishing like Peter. But Jesus had said, come. And we launched forth. Had we stayed, that fear of taking that step forward would have killed our faith. Fear often kills faith. Staying in the boat kills faith. For those that speak Spanish, el temor mata la fe. The faith of a person, your faith cannot grow in the boat. Your faith will grow as you step out of it. Some of us maybe have never walked on water. Maybe we have never experienced anything outside of our boats, be it our work, our schooling, or family, or whatever. You can fill in the blanks. Maybe we have never really taken that step out. And maybe your faith hasn't grown as a result of it. One of the challenges that we are facing right now, and we were sharing that in the Sunday school class, and we sort of rushed over it because it was sort of at the end, is that the Latin American area has asked us to do something, which basically is a venture of faith for us. We just recently had well, I'll actually have to step back a few minutes before that. 2 years ago, an individual came wanting to see in Latin America what God was doing as far as raising up potential Latins to go elsewhere. And I said, bring a plan. Bring a plan. He says, no, I want to come and see. I said, bring a plan. Because we've been part of teaching in 12 different institutions around Latin America, about missions, about church planting, and so forth. I knew that God was raising or creating a wind of potential new missionaries out of Latin America. He came, he didn't bring a plan. And we were asked to then develop the plan. And we are calling that now Converge Global. Basically, we're Reach Global Missionaries, and so this is the component of sending out Latins. When you take a Venezuelan and you take somebody from North Africa and you place them into Australia, until they speak, you cannot tell which is which. Physiologically, a Venezuelan looks so much like a North African. They understand relational contexts. They understand how a family system works. In the majority world, things work a little differently than the northern hemisphere. They understand colonialism. They understand how dominant religion mixes with politics. Northern Africa, it's one religion. In Latin America, it's a different religion, and how that's mixed in with the politics. They understand a lot of things. And so they are wired in a different way than, let's say, we are for being missionaries. And there's potential of 25 million Christians in Latin America that could be missionaries. And God is calling out. He's saying, come. The Bible was written in a language that wasn't even ours initially, in English. It was not written in English. It was translated into English, and we have taken and we've gone as missionaries. And that's good. But it was also written into Spanish later. It was translated into Spanish as well. And their Bible says, go as well. It doesn't say, go if you have blue eyes. It says, go and make disciples. And so God doesn't want just this. He wants those that have dark eyes as well. I happen to have blue eyes. That's how God... And when my daughter was coming along, before she was born, we knew she was going to have blue eyes. Because in both of our backgrounds, there is a lot of blue eyes. That's just the way God had ordained. And yet He called. God calls everybody, everywhere. And it isn't just the blue eyes have to go. It's also the brown eyes. Or the hazel eyes. Or the green eyes. It's all of us that have to go. And so God is raising up Latins. And when this guy came, immediately we had about 30 people. And Effie and I are going, whoa! We had to develop a plan. Now we have one gal that's already in France. We have some others that are in the process, and we shared some of those stories earlier. And God is allowing them to step out of their boat. It's going to be easy? No. When in Venezuela, it takes, for instance, for somebody to leave Venezuela, we're going to have to be very creative. Because economics does not fly out of Venezuela. You cannot get the local currency out of the country, except for what the government allows. And so there's some creativity that has to be part of that process. Because they're only allowed $300 per month, and that is one family member giving to this missionary couple. It's not even a church that can give to this couple. It's not even a sending agency that can give. And so there is a lot of issues that are going to be involved in this. And yet God is raising up missionaries out of Latin America. You take a Latin girl and a North African. Are we all aware of what North Africa is? Off mic. It's the Muslims. Okay. And you wrap the Latin girl with a scarf. she could be another one. They are positioned uniquely to make an inroad. And so our colleagues with the immigrants in Europe are asking, as well as North Africa is opening up for us to send as well. And so we are recruiting people to go. And part of our process with that is facilitating, teaching, training, mobilizing them in this whole process. For us, it's a fascinating new venture that's been added to our plate. Our plate was full. Now, the third R that we see in our passage is risks. Risks. Taking a risk. In verse 29 and 30, if I can find it here. Then Peter got out of the boat and walked on the water and came to Jesus. But seeing the wind, he became afraid, and beginning to sink, he cried out, saying, Lord, save me. Lord, save me. Do you know what? The same issues that were there early, the four things, wind, waves, water, and far from land, are still there. And Peter had taken some steps. And can you imagine taking these steps and going out? And now, I will repeat, if he had stayed in the boat, it would have killed his faith. At least he showed some faith by stepping out. He took that step and went out over that edge of that boat. And he went forth and he started to walk. We don't know how far he got, but we know that he took some risks. These missionaries that are being raised up in Latin America are taking steps. Lead went on a vision trip from Mexico just to see. She came back and said, I'm going to quit everything. I'm going as a missionary. Danielle and Ellie went to Birmingham, England, on a vision trip. They came back more convinced. And Danielle and Ellie have stepped out of the boat. They just moved this week from Caracas, Venezuela, to southern Venezuela, to an area where there's 4 mosques. Why? In order that they can get involved in an internship. And we've been part of that, setting up that process, and I've been trying to communicate while traveling. It's been quite interesting since I don't have solid internet all the time. And we're trying to communicate with them on all of this. But they're moving there, that they will be there for 2 years to work in our own country with this group of people before they go to Birmingham, where they will be working with the immigrants that have come from Northern Africa. Pray for Danielle and Ellie. They both have left jobs. Some of it maybe a little prematurely initially, but they stepped out of the boat. And there have been winds, and yet they're going forward. By the way, we're going to be grandparents. They're expecting. And so we'll be grandparents. We are grandparents to a lot of different ones in Venezuela. Not our own children, but Danielle and Ellie are like children. They are just dear ones to us. And we communicate regularly and working through the issues. Pray that by the year 2013, they will be in Birmingham, joining our Reach Global team there. Now, we just focus in upon ourselves and our situation. We will miss many opportunities that come our way, like widows that need to be taken care of, or needy. Oh, I can't. Yeah, you can. It might take a step out to do it. Or it might be that some of you need to be called to go elsewhere. Some will say, oh, but I'm getting old. No, we are never too old. Missions is not an option, it's an obligation. Or I'm too young, I'm just building my career. Do you know what? Danielle and Ellie were just building their career, and God is calling them. They've changed their direction in their life. Take courage. Take courage. Whatever it is, maybe it's a case in your own family that's fractured, and you're fearful to approach that person and restore and ask for reconciliation. Maybe you need to build in your Jerusalem a little bit, or your Judea, or even go on to other shores. Do you know what? Whatever the fear is in your life, Christ wants to meet that. Peter was the only one that went. And Jesus exclaims that he is one of little faith. There was 11 guys that stayed in the boat. Do you know what? They didn't have any faith. Their faith was dead. They stayed there. They were frozen in that spot, in their illusion, and that's where they stayed. The others probably were saying, oh, Peter, he's a little bit on the crazy side. You know, this guy, he's going to step out. Oh, look at, he's going. What a crazy guy. He's going to sink. And so they basically were hearing a lot of little voices, and Peter probably was hearing these same little voices as well as he was going along, and they were saying, this guy's a basket case. He needs to find a psychiatrist in a hurry. Do you know what? In all of this, Peter knew that he wanted to be with Jesus. If this was Jesus, he wanted to be there. The others were afraid. Even though Peter had little faith, these guys had no faith. Now, I don't know with who we all identify with. I have to ask myself that. Do I identify with Peter with a little bit of faith, or do I identify with the 11 that had no faith? Remember, faith does not grow in the boat. Well, what is unique is one of these short prayers, and one time I was in a big conference, in the pastor's conference, and we were hearing the speaker that had come in, and he was in this prosperity thing and so forth, and a lot of other stuff, and he says, do you know what? You can't pray in a very specific way. You have to always pray very generally. And I was sitting in the back. I couldn't hold my tongue any longer. And I says, do you know what? Peter, in one moment, he cried out, Lord, save me. 3 words in English, 2 in Spanish. Señor, sálvame. Lord, save me. That's all you need is 3 words. It was very specific. He wanted rescued. And that's the other R, is he wanted to be rescued. And he was in there sinking, and there's Jesus. He didn't waste any time. It was immediate. I don't know how far Peter had walked. If he'd taken 1, 2, 3, 10 steps. I don't know how far he'd gotten. But we know that he was fairly close to Jesus because Jesus immediately grabbed Peter's hand and grabbed it. And I don't think Jesus let go anymore. And I don't think Peter was going to let go any longer either. I think those two, they were locked in. And interestingly, for the second time, Peter has used the word Lord. Lord. The first time there was a sort of a doubt, a condition, if it be you. This time there was no doubt. It's Lord, save me. And the response was there. You know, he doubted for a moment. He saw the wind and it rustled him. Those voices were talking in his brain. But, you know, where he all of a sudden took my wife and I, as we do the marriage conferences, and we were just in Mexico, at the end, the last day, and I'm not going to do it, Effie, but the last day, I invited my wife to come and stand beside me. And Joshua says, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. There's the word, Lord. As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. And I grabbed my wife's hand. Grammatically, that's wrong. It should be my house and I. But it says, as for me and my house, putting the decision factor on me. Effie and I have decided to keep going back. Because that's where Christ wants us. He has called us. And we want to be there, engaged, as long as we are allowed. We asked you to be part of sending us back and keep sending us back. But we commit ourselves. And I am leading the charge, and I've invited Effie to be part of that. And I invite you to be our support behind that. Now, here we have Peter. He's in this process of being rescued. And he's sinking before Jesus grabs him. And I go back to this case where Peter is a fisherman. He knew how to swim, because we have another story where he swam to the shore to be where Jesus was, because Jesus had a bonfire going on the shore and he was preparing some fish there, and Peter actually gets into swimming. And so I don't know why he didn't use his nautical skills at this point and start to swim. But he starts sinking, and everything goes haywire in his world. But he gets it right. Lord, save me. He realized it wasn't on him. It wasn't. And just the same way for all of us. It's not on us. We have to be focused. If it was on me and Effie, often when there is no food in the grocery store, or when we see issues going on, which I cannot name, or the fact that the year 2009, there was more people that died of violent death in our city where we live than all of Iraq, together with the military as well as the locals. Just in one city in Venezuela. We're committed. We're still committed to go back. And we're prudent. We don't try to get in where it is, but we do see situations. In January, we're glad we had an old pickup, since our other car was not available for us any longer, because we were packing up, leaving, and pretty soon we had all kinds of arms drawn, not on us, but they were doing a search in that area for some issues in that area. God's protection is on us. He is our focus. Lord, as for me and my house, we will serve you. And we know are calling us to that. You know, Jesus says here, "Oh, you of little faith, why did you doubt?" And I can just see those 11 there still in the boat, and they're cringing. He is saying little faith to them, but us, we didn't have anything. We didn't even step out. Hey, we could have had fun on this water too, and we didn't go. And now the fingers are starting to point at them. And I think they're being smitten. Do you know what? There's those that have little faith. There's those that are without faith. And the fifth R is return. Return. I don't know how far, like I said, they'd gone. And I'm looking for a picture. I saw it one time. I don't know where it went. But there's a picture somewheres that I like to snag and actually throw it up at some point, of Jesus and Peter walking back to the boat together. Jesus was walking on the water the whole time. Peter actually walked twice. He walked to Jesus, sunk, and Jesus rescued him, and now the two of them walk back. What an awesome. That's a miracle. A double miracle. We have two guys walking on water, and one guy actually did it twice. But he did it because of the other guy. And walking back, whether they were arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder, hand in hand, I don't know, but they walked back. And you know what? Those other guys, they were with egg on their face, I'm sure. And when they get back in the boat, something happens. Everything goes calm. I love the fact that this Lord is in control. He's in control. We don't know what's going to be happening to our little boat, our work. And there's so many people that have lost their jobs. We don't know what's going to happen in our family when people turn sick and die. These things that we build our lives around can change. But it's critical to have our eyes focused upon the Lord. He's in control. Have confidence in Him, and He can calm in the midst of whatever the circumstance is in your life. And then the last R. When we get to the last verses there, verse 33. And those who were in the boat worshipped Him, saying, truly, you are the Son of God. It is easy sitting in the boat to say, oh, He is the Son of God. But when you've been in life circumstances and walked out and taken faith and walked out there wherever, that's true worship. But these guys, they'd had it pretty safe. Sure, they recognized it. And God does allow second chances to every one of us. If we never leave the boat, we won't understand it fully. We have to sometimes get away from our boat and see that Lord is in control and that He is the Son of God, the one worthy of worship, the one worthy of preaching, the one worthy of giving testimony to and proclaiming it loudly. Oh, it'd be easy to live in Tacoma and come and sit in the pew. It'd be easy. Sometimes it's easy even being in Valencia, because it's easy to also get out of focus. But the challenge is to remain focused and begin anew worship. Truly, you are the Son of God. Truly, there's no other. It's you. It's you. Some have written, there's a song, goes like something like this. I'm coming back to you, the heart of worship. All about you, Jesus. Or another song from my childhood. Turn your eyes upon Jesus. Look full in His wonderful face. When there's wind, when there's water, and when there's waves, and we're far from shore, it's all about Jesus. It's all about Jesus. God is calling us to leave the comfort of our ship, our boat, our canoe, or whatever it is that's been your illusion, and step out and walk with Him fully. For some, it might be a first time. For others, it might be a rededication. We'll leave that to you. But focus on Him. Confess Him fully. Lord, save me. Lord, save me. Heavenly Father, thank you for this opportunity that we've had of just sharing here this morning from your word, and how in your patience you extend your hand and draw us again and again, giving us opportunity. Save us from our boat. Save us from those winds, waves, water, whatever it is on which we've focused, and put our eyes back on you. Lord, thank you for this church, for their involvement in our ministry. Thank you for their willingness to send us back to where you have called us. In your name we pray. Amen. Blessings on you. Thank you.
This is a prayer.